Hello everyone, welcome to CodeTube. In this video, we will discuss about Fargate and why do we need it. We will also talk about few key concepts which is required to understand Fargate in brief. However, we will also discuss them in great depth in a separate video. I hope the agenda is clear for you guys. Now let's get started. Before we jump any further, let us see why AWS launched Fargate when Amazon already had many options as a compute engine like EC2 and Elastic Beanstalk. Few years back, developers used to deploy and run their application on server by simply copying the jar or war file into the machine and launch them. Dave is one such developer who wants to launch his application. Here Dave apps works fine in his laptop but not able to work in testing or production environment. So he checks ops guy and says that my code is fine, could you please check what is wrong in your server? The ops guy shouts back at Dave and says that there's something wrong in your code, please fix it. Now this could be because of differences in their computing environment. So Dave thinks of an idea. He uses Docker to pack his code along with the configuration and other tools and frameworks required to run his code. In this way, he's sure that his code could run anywhere. But what is Docker? Docker tool was launched in 2013 to create, deploy, and run applications with ease anywhere. Developers started to package up an application with all of the requirements such as libraries and other dependencies and ship it all as one package. It ensures that your application works seamlessly in any environment. So if it ran in my laptop, it can run anywhere. We could create the same environment which is there in my laptop and ship the container to any cloud provider services and it should run there. This made containers to run anywhere from a single machine to a cluster without having to bother about their dependencies or libraries to be made available in those machines. We will discuss what is Docker and container in much more detail in our upcoming videos, but as of now, you can think container as a combination of your application, libraries, dependencies, and OS kernel, everything packed together to enable them to run in any machine. Docker became more and more popular, and since multiple containers were launched in multiple instances, it was getting difficult to manage them all. Let's say you're trying to access your software which is hosted in a container, but for some reason you're not able to. What could be the reason? Maybe a memory issue or the server went down. Whatever the reason could be, you need a service which could spin up a new instance for you and launch your container to reduce the downtime and make your application available 24/7. Or in a real-time example, suppose you host an e-commerce website and the customer traffic in your website is pretty manageable most of the days. But think about a festival season or a big billion day where the customer traffic reaches the roof and your server crashes. So you also need some kind of a software which will scale up or scale down the server cluster on demand, which will make your container highly scalable. That's when Amazon came up with their service ECS called Elastic Container Service in the year 2015, which made the life of developer easier as they don't have to manage the servers and containers running in them. ECS does it all for you. ECS is a highly scalable, high performance container management service that makes it easy to run, stop, and manage the containers for you in a cluster. There is no additional charge for ECS. You pay for the resources that you use. API calls are also available to query the state of cluster, access other resources, and to launch and stop container. When we talk about an instance, in general, it could have multiple softwares like for example a Docker daemon running in them, or a CloudWatch agent to collect metrics and logs from EC2 instance, or an ECS agent to connect to your cluster, and many more. Managing these softwares for a single instance sounds easy, right? But think of a fleet of instances. Now that sounds too difficult to manage. Customers had to manage all the instances and the required softwares which hosted Docker containers. Now that turned to be a huge headache for them. That's when AWS introduced Fargate, which manages all these for you. The customer now just have to manage the containers and not the instances and the software running in those instances. So to summarize, Fargate acts as a compute engine and user no longer have to deal with EC2 instances directly and is managed under the hood. That's why we call them serverless. Fargate will host your application and scale them for you. Let's look at the definition. AWS Fargate is a compute engine for Amazon Elastic Container Services that allows you to run containers without having to provision, configure, and scale clusters of VMs. As we discussed, Fargate will host your application and it will also scale it for you. It is also well integrated in an Amazon ecosystem like ECS or EKS, which makes it highly available. It is also cheap as you pay only for the CPU and memory resources that your application requests for. So how do Fargate work? The developer will have to create a Docker file which will contain all the commands, or we could say instructions, to build an Docker image. This Docker image is used to run as a Docker container. We build an image from a Docker file and store it in a Docker repository. There are multiple repositories available in market like Docker Hub, JFrog, and AWS launched its repository services as ECR, known as Elastic Container. ECR is a fully managed, highly available registry, and since it runs in AWS, it is also scalable. ECS can download your image and run on your cluster. One fun trivia for this, ECR transfers your image via HTTPS and it automatically encrypts images. This makes your images secure. Next step is you need a container manager or an orchestrator. Kubernetes is widely popular in the market. We also have Docker Swarm. But for sake of simplicity, we will use this as an orchestrator service offered by Amazon. As you can see in this image, the ECR has the Docker image stored in it, and ECS pulls the image from ECR and Fargate launches the containers in the cluster. In traditional approach, if you choose EC2, you can create a cluster of EC2 instances and deploy the container in one of them. It is a good approach, but you will end up deploying, scheduling, and scaling all of those. So we will use Fargate and let Fargate do all the heavy lifting for you. That's all for today's video. In next video, we will see a demo on how to deploy your sample application in Fargate. Thank you.